Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Fairy God Boss live webinar. We're so excited to have you join us. We're just going to give everyone a few more seconds to connect. So while we're waiting, we like to know where everyone's tuning in from today. So you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a chat box. If you feel comfortable doing so, please send us a message saying hey and letting us know where you're joining from. And we'll get started in just a couple seconds. Great. Well, it seems like we have people from all over, which is great to see. All right. Well, let's just go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Julian Andrews, and I am a Senior External Communications Specialist at nVent, and I have the privilege of moderating today's panel. For those of you who do not know, Fairy God Boss is the largest online career community for women. Millions of women visit Fairy God Boss for career connections, jobs, community advice, hard to find intel about how companies treat women, and virtual events like this one. Before we get started with the content, I just have a couple of quick announcements. First of all, the session will be recorded and shared via email with all registrants if you'd like to replay or rewatch any pieces of it. And also during the discussion, we would like to hear from you. We hope that you will use the chat, which you'll see everybody currently putting where they're tuning in from on the right-hand side of your screen. So please send us a message, comments, and then any questions if you have any to the panelists. We will try to take some audience questions after a couple of prepared ones. Now I'm excited to kick off today's event, Heard, Respected, and Represented, Thriving in nVent's Culture of Inclusion, sponsored by nVent. And I'm thrilled today to be joined by three of my wonderful colleagues, Amy Escobio, Walia Hassan, and Kristen Hansen. Could you each just take a minute to introduce yourselves? We'd love to hear what's going on in your life, personally, professionally, and what you do in your role today at nVent. Amy, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Julian. I was reading through the comments and I see we have a couple fellow San Diegans in there. So hello, everybody. So my name is Amy. A little bit about me. My background is in engineering. I have my master's in business and I've been with nVent for 11 years now. I've held various roles in product management, marketing, vertical market leadership, and I am currently the product line vice president and general manager for nVent Thermal. Walia, over to you.
Walia, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Excited to be here. Too excited, actually. So forgot to unmute myself. Just like Amy, my background is also engineering. I'm part of nVent family for the last 12 years. Over almost 34 years of engineering and management careers, I have different jobs, product management, quality, design engineering, and now customer experience management at nVent. I'm originally from Pakistan and I have worked in different locations. For now, I'm in Minnesota. Kristen?
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. My name is Kristen. My background, actually, I started my career in retail buying and planning, so quite the opposite of engineering, maybe. I moved over to the sourcing side of the world and sourced chemicals and equipment at another company before joining nVent just about 2 years ago. I'm currently the director of sourcing for our North America Enclosures segment. So my team is responsible for the supplier relationship management and commercial terms and negotiations. Outside of work, I've been married for 10 years and I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So a lot of the experiences that you hear me draw on today are from trying to find harmony from those big roles.
Great. Thanks to you all for the nice introductions. And for those of you who might have just joined us in the last couple of minutes, I want to remind you that we will be taking audience questions. So if you would like to submit your questions to the comment box on the right, we will do our best to respond to as many of those as we can. So to start with a little bit about nVent, how has nVent established a workplace culture that prioritizes inclusivity, And then do you have any advice for establishing a culture of inclusivity for others in their organizations? Walia, can we start with you?
So I would start with how first. The senior management, our CEO and CFO, are very committed to the cause. They also understand that if employees prosper, they feel safe and they are open in their conversations, they are authentic. Everyone benefits, the employees benefits as well as the business benefits. So with that inclusion, CEO Inclusion Council was formed. That's the foundation. And a big portion of it is coming up with a policy. So an advisory council was formed. I'm part of that advisory council. And in the last 4 or 5 years, the policy is to make it a part of a DNA. There are several different policies. I would just bring up only one portion of it today, is that when we have a hiring happening, there is a conscious effort to include diverse candidates in the interview. So when the resumes are coming, we have a diverse slate. That is one example of making sure that diversity is part of our organization. And there are other policies that kind of make it part of our organizational DNA. So after that, the next level is communication. It's continuous. Our CEO as well as senior managers, not only they are trained, but they bring up this conversation. And these conversations can be difficult, but we want to listen and we want to talk about it regularly. So there are emails in the meetings. This is brought up. And then there's one more step is the feedback. So employee feedback is coming in, it's reviewed, it's acted upon. So that kind of gives a very strong sense of community. The last portion, and it's very important portion of the whole process, is employee resource groups. Employee resource groups are driven by employees. It's their choice to participate or not. But what happens is it brings up a lot of engagement. A lot of people have their own causes. Climate is one example. Women resources are another example. So there are many other examples of employee resource groups that continue to develop and make this effort as part of our DNA. So that's the how part. I think I'll give it a break and have somebody else take the other side.
So I can jump in to add to Walia. So Walia, I think, did an excellent job explaining some of the structural things that nVent does to really make diversity and inclusion part of our DNA here at nVent. There are a few things that have really struck me since I've joined. We have a dedicated DEI team led by our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, and they put on multiple events throughout every month, very approachable events, right? So when you think about how could you potentially increase inclusivity within your own team, even as an individual contributor or as a small leader within a team, they host events such as a book club once a month where they choose children's books. So again, very approachable with topics such as women's history or different holidays. And then they facilitate a discussion on those books. Our Chief Diversity Officer also holds listening circles, which is a very small group of people, usually 5 to 10. And I believe these began right around George Floyd's murder here in Minnesota. And they are raw and very intimate conversations. I've been very lucky to be a part of one. And I think it's just creating that safe space for conversation and holding the space for difficult conversations that I've really been, it's made me really be proud to be a part of the organization. I think the biggest thing, like I said, at a smaller level, when you think of as an individual contributor or as a manager of a small team, it is how do you lead with empathy, create space for those difficult conversations, and then are you actively welcoming the uniqueness that we all hold in ourselves? I think those are kind of more grassroots way where you can start to build culture of inclusivity.
So Kristen, you mentioned culture. So I'd like to turn the conversation and just go a little bit more down that road a bit and talk about our company's culture. So as we all know, company culture plays a really critical role in employee engagement and retention, experience, culture of inclusivity. So how would you define nVent's culture? And then building off of that, how does this culture help you achieve balance in your work? Amy, could you kick us off with this one?
Yeah, I would love to. So here at nVent, we have what we call our win right values, and those 6 values are really the foundation of our culture. Briefly going through them, we have customer first, innovation and adaptability, absolute integrity, respect and teamwork, positive energy, and accountability for performance. And these values are really at the heart of all that we do. They're part of the employee onboarding, but then literally day to day, they are part of how we present ourselves both to our colleagues and to our customers and how we conduct ourselves in business. They're also part of our annual review process, integrated into our annual review. So really, Kristen talked about walking the walk. Absolutely. This is not just something that's in an employee handbook. It's a part, it's what our culture is based on. On a personal level, I could not imagine working at a company that did not have these values that are well aligned with my own personal values. It's a must-have for me to be able to work at a company that has absolute integrity and where we do put the customer first. They are our priority, and where all team members are treated with respect. Kristen, did you have a couple comments on this topic?
Of course. So culture, to Amy's point, the values is really the foundation in which our culture is built. If I had to pick one word to define nVent's culture from what I've experienced, it would be authentic. That is my favorite thing about working here by far is the people. And I truly believe that is because everyone feels comfortable showing up as who they are every day. And some days we show up better than others, but there is a sense of authenticity and genuineness. People are looking out for each other. We get to know each other on a personal level. And I truly believe that allows us to reach another level of inclusivity. For me, I have 2 small children right now, so my life can get very messy very quickly. And if I wasn't able to share that, I'm exhausted today, team, because my kids were up all night. If I had to come in and put on a facade, that's just adding a layer of exclusivity to us being able to show up as ourselves every day in the office and at work.
So expanding on this idea of balance, how can emphasizing work-life balance help in creating a workplace that is inclusive and welcoming? How do we tie these ideas together based on your experiences? Walia, could you start on this one?
Yeah, sure. If you allow me, I want to build on the previous conversation a little bit. So innovation is one of the values, and the fact that everyone can bring their authentic word and authentic self, as well as they know that their input is respected and valued. These 2 areas gives everyone a lot of flexibility to be as innovative and bring the creative ideas. So that's for the previous one. About the work-life balance, I can only give you my own example. I took care of my mother for her last 8 years of her life, and in the last few years of her life, things got complicated. I was called to hospitals many times. There were emergencies, there were surgeries, and this is all pre-COVID. Working remotely was a new idea. I feel that in the beginning, you are not very comfortable discussing this. I think at least I was not. But my manager, my co-workers were constantly asking, how am I managing? How am I feeling? How is my mother feeling? How am I do I need a break? And if somebody else can help. That sense of community gave me such a lot of confidence to balance my work. And I was working at odd hours. The work was still getting done, but the reassurance that life is not going to break. I have to take care of my family first and then come to the work with a full confidence. That is an example of a culture where we lean on each other. We know each other, we know who can help, And that in turn later on allowed me to be helpful for other people. So I think building a community and a sense of reliance on each other is a very valuable thing in an organizational culture.
Kristen, I think you had something to add to this.
Yeah, so there is a very specific moment that is ingrained in me. So before I joined nVent, I was interviewing or chatting with my now boss, and he has young children as well, and we were talking about the challenges of balancing work life, personal demands, and he brought up the term work-life integration instead of work-life balance. And the focus on the word integration, how he explained it was, you would never ask me to go work late at night or finish a project. So why do we feel the need to ask for time to go to a doctor appointment or to go take a walk or work out or take care of our mental health? And that conversation was such an unlock on why nVent was different before I even started. And as a leader, that has allowed me in practice to lead with empowerment. My team has a ton of autonomy and flexibility. And to see that come to fruition and live, not just in that conversation, but outside of that conversation, has been amazing. Now, for that to work, there are a few things that are really critical, right? Trust. So I know that my employees work their tails off and they get done what needs to get done. There's a lot of communication and very clear expectations, right? But because they are empowered and they have the autonomy and flexibility, I believe that everyone is more engaged. The reality is we all have demands outside of work, right? Whether they're visible demands or invisible, whether you share them or you keep them private. I think as a leader, the most important thing that we can do is recognize that everyone's demands outside of work will look different. And the most successful leaders, the most successful companies will embrace that and allow their employees to get done what needs to get done both outside of work and at work in a way that works best for them. Our personal lives are always going to bleed into how we show up into work. And I think the ability to integrate personal lives into our professional lives is what's going to drive inclusivity for organizations at every life stage, right? To Walia's point, it's not just about having kids, it's about having a puppy or taking care of a family member. Again, there are all kinds of different stages in life that require flexibility.
Yeah, Kristen, that's really good perspective on that topic. And I think that there are some misconceptions about the idea of work-life balance. And I really like how you reframed that concept as work-life integration. Are there any other kind of misconceptions around work-life balance that you see that you think we should be aware of and thinking about?
I think the idea that remote work has solved this flexibility arrangement. I am very guilty of remote work bleeding into working more. So my office is unfortunately right next to my bedroom. So it's very easy for me to check in, right? Most of us have work on our phones. And while remote work and flexibility can empower and allow us to have the space that we need for both sides of our lives, it can also make those boundaries more difficult to set. So I kind of laughed when I saw the title of this, of people who've achieved work-life balance, because I don't know that I would put myself in that camp, but I'm working on it. But I think remote work has helped us a lot, but it definitely has presented some new challenges as well. And Amy, I believe you have a good example to share from this.
Yeah, I would say the one big misconception is that one size does not fit all. You know, we all have our unique set of circumstances and priorities, and it really varies for each individual. My example here is that I actually worked from home for almost 10 years prior to COVID, and I did fine. It worked for me given my circumstances. But when the pandemic did come and I was unable to leave home, and just all the pressures of, you know, the difficulties of doing business in a pandemic, I completely lost control over work-life balance. And as Kristen said, I was working literally day and night. So for me, work-life balance was regained by establishing a routine and actually setting up an office outside of my home and having that separation between work and life. That being said, I've found a balance at this point between, in office and at home. And having that flexibility is what I found to be the most important for me. And at the end of the day, it comes down to performance, right? And what you are doing for the company and how you are contributing and how you are delivering results. So that's one thing that I love about nVent is that we do have that flexibility, at least to some degree, to do what works for us.
That's really good feedback. We actually have a question from the audience at this point, and it is kind of getting back to this idea of employee health and growth. This is from Susie. She wrote, I think that companies are making some strides in this direction, but I feel like I've seen very few that are even close to achieving this type of environment. Leaders are focused on business growth and are often less focused on employee health and growth. How do you suggest somebody start the right conversations with their leadership to start moving in this direction? And I'll open this up to any of you who would like to respond.
I can take a shot at that, Julian. So I think mental health is absolutely critical. And for me and for my team, I think it's very important just to acknowledge that work is just one aspect of life. There's so much more to each of us. And for that reason, I really value interpersonal relationships, and I seek to get to know those who I work with and really just understand them on a more human level. And I think that having that open and honest communication and trust makes these conversations a little bit easier. It's not just all business. I would also say that mental health is incredibly important because many of our jobs are very stressful. And for those who really care about the company and about delivering results, it can weigh really heavily on us. And that stress can affect our sleep, it can affect our diet, our focus, all of which negatively impacts performance. So it's not only in our best interest, but also in the best interest of the company to ensure that we are doing all that we can and we have all the resources available to us to be able to take care of our mental health.
Thanks, Amy. Kristen or Walia, do you have anything to add to that?
I think a commitment from senior management is a critical portion, and the question perhaps is how do we open our senior leadership towards this effort and make it part of a policy and continue that. And I feel that sometimes it can be difficult. I think the starting point could be having a conversation with your local group, with your direct manager, with your colleagues, and then taking a level up to your senior managements of your location and so on. I think most CEOs are interested in getting the maximum profit. And if the connection between the employee mental health as well as feeling of being inclusive and being safe in a safe environment is connected to the profits, I think all CEOs will be sold on it. Other examples, there are a lot of examples that other companies are doing it. I think sharing those examples at different levels, and I would love to see nVent being an example, can help convey this method of conveying to the employees to give their maximum potential, to grow with maximum potential, and then obviously the organization grows as well.
Kristen, I saw you unmuted briefly. Do you have something you want to add to that?
No, I think they covered it beautifully.
Sounds good. Well, Amy, you brought up mental health briefly as a part of your answer. Mental health has always been an important issue, but in the past few years, it's really risen even more to the forefront of conversations about the workplace specifically. Why is it important that we normalize discussing mental health at work? And then to take that a step further, what approach do you take as leaders to contribute positively to this shift where talking about mental health is more appropriate at work and even expected? Kristen, do you want to start us out with this one?
Of course. So, as Amy and Walia both covered, mental health is going to determine how we show up every day, right? We take time out of our day to go to an annual checkup, and you would tell your doctor, hey, I'm going to the dentist. I hope we get to a point in our professional lives where we can say, hey, I'm going to therapy. I'll be back in an hour. Or, hey, I need to take a walk because I'm feeling really overstimulated. It's so critical that that becomes as normalized as any other aspect of our health that we take care of. As a manager, I think the number one thing is to be vulnerable, to be open about my own needs as a leader, right? Hey, I'm going to go for a walk. I need to take a break. I am taking a mental health day, right? Being very open about my own state, but also being, like I said earlier, leading with empathy and being open to the conversations that may be uncomfortable. It's a gift, right? When you think about it, a manager or a leader, you have such an impact on someone's day-to-day life. It's a gift and a real treasured responsibility that someone would come to you with a moment of vulnerability or a need. So I think treating it that way and viewing it like that is a really important perspective to have as a leader. For employees who may be nervous about how to broach this topic, if it's maybe not something that's in their cultural DNA, I live in the world of negotiation, so I'm going to take some from my negotiation playbook, which is practice, right? Sit with a friend and do a role play. Hey, walk through what you would want to say to your boss and be direct, right? Do not be afraid to ask for what you need, because if you do not ask for it, the answer is always going to be no. So you have to be the biggest advocate for yourself first. And if the culture isn't there to support you, then that's a different problem.
That's really good advice, Kristen. Thank you. Shifting gears just a little bit towards more talking about career paths and career journey and making transitions. I know that all of you have had a variety of different types of roles throughout your career, and I'm sure there are many on the call that have had to navigate through different career paths during their professional journeys. As we all know, this process can be filled with challenges and it can be difficult. So Walia, could you start us off and kind of share how you've made career transitions in the past, and then what kind of support you've received during those times?
So one thing that is important is that not only I have shifted my roles and different organization and responsibilities, I have moved countries several times. So it's not just a change in my career, it's practically changed everything around you. You may not understand the language. So I worked for a while in Germany, and I was young at that time, so a little better at learning new languages. One of the biggest challenge was that I was struggling or paying attention so much to understand the language as well as the engineering side of it, that every single day I had a headache. And for the first time, I realized that learning a language takes a lot more mental energy as compared to anything else. The support I got, I think, first is my family. They gave me the confidence to go wrong and try things that I may fail at, and not feel with a small loss, not feel like this is the end of it. So keep trying. I would say I almost never got anything right on the first time. So it was a struggle. Changing roles is also within the same organization can put a little bit of a different stress. When you are leaving a previous job and starting a new one within the same organization, it doesn't cut off. You're sort of for a while doing two jobs. And at that point, you have to be you want to be fair to the organization. You want to make sure this is a smooth out transition. But at the same time, you have to take care of yourself as well. You have the new job to prove. So in that case, I would say the help is from your colleagues, previous colleagues as well as the new colleagues. So you have to rely on other people. And relying on other people is all based on building relationships. So it takes a while, but keep trying and not be afraid of failure. That's what I feel is my method of growing my career.
I can add a couple comments to that. So a few years ago, I had a pretty big pivot in my professional journey. So I had been a product manager for about 10 years at that point, and a marketing leadership role opened up. And I didn't have marketing experience, but what I did have was a deep understanding of the products and the market trends and the challenges that our customers faced. So it was definitely a learning experience for me, but thankfully the skill set that I brought to the table was synergistic with the team, who had a tremendous amount of marketing experience and skill. So I would say the takeaway here is that it's often so easy to focus on what you don't have and to get down on yourself and discourage yourself. But I would encourage you to know your own strengths and to advocate on your behalf. It's not what you know today, it's what you can learn and what you can bring to the table. So being able to really understand and express your own unique value and how it can benefit the company, and then just go for it. You're never going to succeed if you don't try.
That's great. I'd just like to remind everybody that we are taking audience questions. So if you have questions for our panelists, please put them in the comment box and we will do our best to get to them. But in the meantime, so Amy, you and Walia and Kristen, you've all at points talked about kind of advocating for yourself and taking ownership over your careers. Do you have any advice for kind of how to prepare for these kinds of conversations with your manager that might be challenging?
I'll go first. I think anytime I feel a need to have a difficult conversation, any conversation, it could be with a family member or with my manager or a colleague, I need to write down, I need to kind of assess what I feel. And once I have written down, I try to sequence my conversations, so make it easier, and try to see if I was the receiving party of that conversation. So kind of bring the context on why I'm having the conversation and then actually get to the point of what I want. I still cannot do it on impromptu. I have to write it, and it allows me to think through it too. Sometimes I say, maybe this is not the right time to have that difficult conversation. But most of the time, writing helps me clarify in my mind what I want to say and sort of focus on the end goal. So, what is the result of this conversation in my mind? It should be that way I can have the conversation in a shorter period and also keep any emotions out of that.
Well, yeah, I love that. And I guess extending on that, not only clearly communicating what you need, but I firmly feel that most managers want to help, right? They want their employees to be healthy and happy and, performing at their highest level. And so I would also say if there's anything that your manager can do to help, ask for it. Don't be afraid to reach out and, ask for that support or those resources.
So building off of that now, or Kristen, did you want to add to that? I see you unmuted.
Sorry. Yeah, jump
Good.
in. Sorry. I heard something this weekend that has really stuck with me that I want to share because it's similar to this vein of getting into an uncomfortable conversation, to Wally's point, but preparing and making sure that you're advocating for yourself. I saw a quote that was, "Don't trade short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction." So the idea that we avoid discomfort in the short term, all we're doing is we are delaying need, right? If you're not asking for your manager for what you need, you're just delaying the pain, right? So to me, that was just so impactful, personal life, professionally. So be brave in your conversations and don't be afraid to ask for what you need, to Amy's point. Thanks, Julian.
Of course, yeah. We have a question from the audience. Working in corporate America can be competitive, and a lot of us enjoy the fast-paced, getting things done ride. So what are some guardrails to establish in order to protect yourself from yourself in this sense?
I can comment there. I think one thing that has really worked for me is just to be grounded and take a moment to level set on what is most important to me. Because sometimes it becomes completely overwhelming. And so just reminding myself, I have an amazing job. I have an amazing team. I have a family who loves me. I'm healthy, just a moment of mindfulness just to be thankful for everything that I do have and just put things into perspective.
So to add on to Amy's, this is very tactical, but I turn my notifications off on my phone for Outlook and Teams at 5:30 to 7 o'clock in the morning every night, and they're off all weekend. I like having it on my personal phone. For me, it's a little bit of a comfort, but I am not good at turning it off myself. So having those pings be off during those times and it be family time. I am also working on and not excellent at yet, but still in progress, not perfection, putting my phone away like in a drawer from 5 to 7 p.m. to Amy's point, to really refocus on what is my core and what is my essence, and that's my family, right? Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes we need to draw strong boundaries, and I would agree I'm not always great at it, but those are some really tactical things that I'm doing.
We have another question from the audience. My difficulties stem from communicating both to my manager and teammates, as I'm one of the older members on this team. My enthusiasm and energy is considered overwhelming, and that really impacts overall balance. And at work, having that support is so important. What do you suggest I do?
I think it depends how the enthusiasm and energy is coming across. So I guess the way I interpret that is I tend to work very long hours, crazy hours, in part because I have little ones as well, right? But I also want to respect the boundaries of my team. And so I leave those emails in my outbox until working hours. That way I'm still doing me, but I'm also respecting the boundaries of my team. So I think it's being able to have that that awareness and finding something that works for both.
That is really good advice. Kristen, do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you have the opportunity to ask for some type of like 360 feedback on, enthusiasm and energy is a wonderful thing, right? And sometimes our strengths can also become our blind spots. So potentially better understanding, to Amy's point, how do you tailor your message or tailor your approach so that you don't lose that enthusiasm and that energy, because that's what's making you passionate and bringing a lot of strength to your job. So I think asking for feedback on how to better interact could be a good step forward as well.
Great. So to take a brief break from audience questions, although if you have them, please continue to put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to a few more in a couple of minutes. Fairy God Boss has a tradition of asking its panelists a question based on the idea that women do not often feel comfortable enough bragging or taking ownership of all the amazing things that they achieve. So I'd like each of you to share with us an accomplishment, and this can be either personal or professional, that you are most proud of. And Amy, we will start with you.
You know, I recently achieved a years-long goal. I worked really hard for it, and I got my promotion to VP. And I found myself being extremely introspective about, you know, what it took to get here, and thinking back over the highs and the lows, and the projects that were a success and those that were an epic failure. And the people that I met along the way. And I would say the thing that I'm most proud of is really just the journey. You know, what I've learned, and who I've met and who I've becoming. That's kind of what I'm most proud of.
I will add to that. For me, with so many different roles, one of the important roles was being a mother. And while I was working on my career, coming up with work-life balance, moving countries also means that I lose my infrastructure. My mother is not around to take care of my kids when they are sick, or my neighbors are totally new people and they may not trust me, and I need time to build relationships and so on. So in that whole process, I think what I'm really proud of is being able to have two grown kids who are very positive people. They are happy people, and they are contributor to the society. While at the same time, I have managed my own career, and I'm happy and sane, and adding learning and a positive person at the end. So I think work-life balance is really my strength here, and I am very proud of managing that.
So in case you haven't noticed, I am very passionate about culture and development. So I would say the thing I am most proud of is it's been a dream of mine for a long time to lead a team. And I have the privilege of leading a really amazing team here at nVent. And I am very proud of the culture that I've been able to build as a leader. The thing I will brag about is over the last 18 months, I've been at nVent about 2 years. In the last 18 months, we've had 0 turnover on my team except for promotions. So that feels pretty incredible. And I'm really proud of, I think, the culture and engagement that I've been able to build.
That is awesome. It's great to hear about all of those things. And yeah, congratulations to all of you on your various accomplishments. And I can see in the chat we have some congratulations and well wishes being directed your way. So thanks for sharing that. We have a couple of questions from the audience. So as somebody that is just, and this is from somebody at nVent, as somebody just starting out in a career at nVent and wanting to grow at nVent, what advice would you share?
I know our CEO says it all the time, but be bold. You know, don't wait for opportunities to come your way, but instead seek opportunities and seek ways that you can contribute. Yeah, don't be afraid of failure. Just go for it.
So I would say similar to that, be bold. Right? When I'm recruiting, I look for disruptors, right? I want positive disruption. I want people. So this quote behind me, I know someone mentioned it. The most dangerous phrase is, well, we've always done it that way. At nVent, we want people who are questioning everything. We are in a state of massive growth right now. And the only way that we're going to continue to support that is by continuing to have bold and big ideas.
Since the question is from an nVent person, I would say that be a part of ERG, take a leadership position in an ERG. So if you're leading, you automatically are developing a lot of contacts, and you have visibility for the very senior level managers. It brings up your leadership skills. So that is one of the many ways, and you can be bold at an ERG as well. So one of the many ways to grow in nVent.
Another question from the audience: what is your advice for people managers to start creating an inclusive culture on their team? Are there any specific practices that you would recommend for the kind of taking that inclusive culture and at the company level, but then applying it to your specific direct team?
I would say just leading by example, right? I think your team is going to, we often talk about what shadow do you cast, right? And being the leader that your team wants you to be, you know, and the best version of yourself. I think that's how you create a culture within your team. And I touched on it before with the open and honest, candid, and personal relationships. I think that's definitely a good place to start.
I would add to that is be a good listener. So any difficult conversation starts with having the capacity to listen to your employees. And sometimes there are very subtle messages, not very bold and clear messages. But as a manager, as a people leader, being a good listener and then acting upon it is a very important part of building that confidence for the other employees to come to you for help.
Great. We have, now the questions are flying in, of course, now that we have 12 minutes left. As the managers, or as managers on the panel, I have to believe that all of you have had tough conversations with direct reports. I find that as a woman, I gravitate towards empathy and concern for how my words are read and received instead of focusing on just saying what needs to be said. Have any of you had to deliver direct, time-sensitive information, and how did you overcome the feelings that you had with how the information would be received? How do you balance being heard and still remaining true to who you are?
I take a page out of Walia's book
I
here,
can start.
and I think about what needs to be said, and I actually list it out, and I like to stick with facts. You know, I try to identify specific times or situations that I can use as an example. That helps me convey what needs to be said.
Yeah, and I think there's a misconception that empathy cannot mean direct, right? Sometimes a great show of empathy is giving someone very direct feedback. In my role with internal partners, external partners, I deliver and receive a lot of very tough messages. Sometimes the reality is it's better for everyone if you're able to just say what needs to be said instead of trying to beat around the bush, is what I've found in my experience. If that's not something that you're comfortable with, then Amy and Walia have said this. Like I said, in negotiation prep, you plan, right? Write down what needs to be said, stick to the facts, and just be straightforward.
Cool. Another one from the audience. Can each of you give one piece of advice for a young woman entering the workforce in an industrial manufacturing company?
I'll take that first.
I can start.
So, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kristen.
No, Walia, go ahead.
Sorry. So I think for young women, they are in a very in an environment they have a lot of information. So when I started my career in a very male-dominated area, I didn't have the same resources. Going to having internet and figuring out what is a possibility is a huge thing. For me, it was a physical library where I had to find the right book to read and how to manage my life in a totally new environment. One thing is, I think it takes some practice to build yourself with a confidence. I read somewhere that women they don't even apply to a job unless they meet all the requirements. Whereas men may apply for a job with half the requirements meeting. I think it's you have to put faith in yourself and say, whatever I don't know today, I will learn tomorrow. And that confidence comes with practice. That confidence comes with trying and failing and trying again. So my advice is just go for it. And if you failed, you've learned something in the process and you'll be better next time.
Kristen, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so I came from the retail industry, which is actually very heavy female dominated, and transitioned into the industrial side of the world. So I had, to be frank, a bit of a culture shock when I, not at nVent, but when I joined my previous company. And the best piece of advice I can have is find your circle. So find people who are going to support you, who you can have honest conversations with, and who are going to be in your corner. Because it's not always going to be easy. There are going to be moments where you need a shield because things feel really hard. I'm sure Walia and Amy have many examples of times where they've had really tough experiences. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But when you have a corner of people, and this space is so in need of more women in the industrial manufacturing space, find your people and continue to be bold and try something new and try something different, because this space is so fun. And I feel grateful that I overcame some of the hurdles and culture shock to really fall in love with the industrial manufacturing space.
I think only one more comment there is be proud of who you are, and what you bring to the table and your perspectives and your experience. I know, Kristen, the first time we met, you're like, yeah, I came from retail and this is why I'm going to be awesome at this job. And I was like, wow, like she brings such a different perspective, and a different way of doing things, it was just so refreshing, and just owning that experience. I think women, I don't want to generalize here, but women tend to, to discount themselves. And I think that's such a travesty. So.
Well, we're coming up close to time, but we have time for one more question. And it is, what advice would you give your younger self? And I'll have each of you answer this one, starting with Kristen.
So if you look at my strengths finders, you'll see that achiever is my number one strength. So I would tell myself, my type A self, to slow down and enjoy the ride. The journey that I had mapped out for myself at 23 is nothing like where I am today, and I am grateful for it. So careers are long. So be curious and go after the next challenge and just keep learning, but don't try to plan your future.
I want to touch on something that Kristen mentioned before, and that was about finding your circle. Just surround yourself with people who inspire you or have skills that you admire, people that have the right intentions and that are going to be honest and push you to be the best version of yourself. That circle is invaluable as you progress through your career.
What I would say to my younger self is a few things that I mentioned, like the ability to organize my thoughts and write that down. I learned it the hard way. Nobody told me that I would get a lot more easy to communicate, and a lot more things that I can do will be more organized. So becoming more organized was not natural to me. I come from a very chaotic family, many moves as a child. So um, I learned to be organized a little late in life, and it could save me a lot of grief. or difficulty, I would say. So being organized is a skill. It does not come, and it takes patience to make it part of you. And I think it helps in the long term. I'm working now for 37 years as an engineer. I don't count the jobs before that. So it takes a lot of things to learn. Everything comes easy, but the more organized you are, it gets easier.
Well, thank you so much, Walia, Amy, and Kristen, for joining us today and for sharing your fantastic advice and perspective. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else on the call did as well. And thank you to all of everybody who tuned in for the discussion. We're really happy to have you here. As a reminder, we'll be sending out a recording of today's event along with resources to learn more about opportunities at nVent. And in the meantime, be sure to check out nVent's profile and jobs on Fairy Godboss. Also, we would love to hear your feedback to help us improve future events. So please go to the Type Form tab on the right side of your screen to share your thoughts in a 1-minute survey. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.